Welcome back to another episode of Breaking Down Designs, a series where I take a look at a variety of different characters in media and try to break down and describe what the artists behind them wanted to convey in terms of playstyle and personality. For this one, we have Reinhardt, Torbjorn, and Brigitte, since they're all pretty closely related in lore. I could have technically put Jetpack Cat in here too, but the script is already getting kinda long, and I'll likely group her with Wrecking Ball. I'll go through all three characters' original and new designs, as some of the changes are kind of interesting to talk about, so this one's gonna be kind of long. It would be greatly appreciated if you guys liked and subscribed. It helps boost these videos in the algorithm a bit, and you guys also seem to really like them, and they seem to be quite helpful. Also, if you can, hype the video. I actually have no idea how that system works, but it would also mean a lot. Now we can go ahead and get started with the human-sized Jaeger.
Today we face the monsters that are at our door and bring the fight to them. Today we are canceling the apocalypse.
100% German beer!
Starting with his original color palette. His palette is a bit unique as it doesn't adhere to the 60-30-10 rule. His primary is a light steel color, his secondary is a dark gray, and his highlights are yellow and red. In his redesign, his tertiary is yellow and the red is basically gone. They also exposed his face so that his bright white beard is visible. The contrast really brings a large focus to his head. The main thing that his scheme is supposed to convey is that he's covered in metal, because his whole thing is that he's a futuristic knight. In fact, most of Ryan's design relies on the physical aspects and varying sizes of his design rather than his colors. But the yellow on him has a bit of an amber edge to it. This gives us a little glimpse into the man beneath the armor. Yellow is a very active and jovial color. Despite his age, he's very young at heart. It also kind of looks like cracks in a rock when you look at his armor, and the glow it has inside of it.
Everyone, this is May. Hi, everyone.
Nice to meet you.
Granted, I would have liked to have some more yellow in his base design, possibly incorporating some heraldry like cloth around his waist or shoulders, but that would make him look a little too fantasy-based rather than sci-fi, which is not the intent of his design, as well as adding a lot of cloth to him would need fabric simulation, which would be a lot of work, and I doubt they'd want that. Editing me here. Now that I think on it, hanging fabric from his armor would make his silhouette look kind of muddy, so I don't think that would be a good idea. That would leave making his metal yellow, which looks like gold, but Reinhardt as a character doesn't fully match with the idea of gold, and all that kind of is evoked with wealth. There's that, but that's to me at least. So that leaves making some of his paneling some other yellow material, which his redesign set out to do. Overall, his palette is very simple because it's mostly meant to convey the idea of a metal-clad knight. Then we can cover the physical aspects of his design. He is about 7'4" or 223 centimeters tall. He's also about 8 heads tall, but that's if you count his helmet as a head, and not the head within the helmet. Granted, his head is the same size as his helmet with his skin off, so it's not how humans work, but okay. Most of the focus of Reinhardt's design comes from the physical aspects rather than his palette. His original skin is far more angular than his new one. As we should know, larger triangular shapes will typically draw attention first, so the primary focus of his design are his shoulder pads because of their sheer size, the lion crest on his left forearm, and his hammer. Ryan also emphasizes the lion with the way he stands, making it one of the furthest forward parts on him, closest to his opposition. I could go into depth on some of Overwatch's cast having animal motifs and how that plays into their designs, but that's a whole other video. To go into more detail on his shoulder pads, when combined with the detail in his torso, it leads to this very diagonal and explosive look to his shoulders. Comparatively, lots of the other detail and lines found on him are pretty vertical and straight, so it puts this focus on these very wide and broad shoulders. These details, when combined with his relatively smaller waist, leads to a very heroic and proud silhouette. It's very representative of a stylized man's body, like Mr. Incredible. A more toned-down variation of this silhouette and look would be the default Lawbringer from For Honor. It's that same heroic knightly look. Mauga also has this explosive look in the center of his chest, which comes from his tattoos and his heart implants. But Mauga has a stance where he's squared off and quite flat, as someone in my comments mentioned. His hitbox is a giant rectangle in comparison to Reinhardt's slight tilt in terms of feet and shoulder placement. This is a bit of a callback, but Ryan's kind of built like that dude from the show World of Quest. I'm dropping references left, right, and center here, man. Who knows what I'll mention next? Fanboy and Chum Chum? Mars Needs Moms? Who knows? I'm like Pandora's box over here. Back to the other focuses. The hammer is a pretty big focus because the end of it is so large and atop a long shaft, so the physical separation and size of it puts a large focus on it. The top of it also has a lion engraved into it. Hammers are very close range and blunt weapons, very much reliant on brute physical strength. Like I've mentioned in a different video, it's a very masculine invoking weapon, which suits his player fantasy quite well as a chivalrous knight, which we do associate with men more often. Weapons that are a bit more feminine invoking would be like spears, daggers, most long-range weapons, rapiers, items that require a bit more of a tactical approach and more finesse rather than barbaric swinging. That's also where we get the idea of fighting someone like a man comes from. It's that very face-to-face, no tricks or dastardly tactics being put into place. It's that shoulder-to-shoulder, brute force contact with another man, and then it's basically whoever's just stronger wins. But that's kind of a whole other discussion though.
Don't just stand there. Come out and fight like a man.
I'm not falling for that one.
Just trying to have fun.
Speaking of lions, the other focus is the very detailed and large lion crest on his forearm. It has the most amount of visual detail within a small space in his design, which draws attention to it. Lions are large and proud creatures, and as a wise man once said, king of the jungle.
I would be a wolf-lion hybrid mix. King of the jungle, but still social and with it and ferocious.
Lions are apex predators. The choices they make dictate many different outcomes within their environments. Think of Mufasa and all the responsibility he holds as a character, right? With his role in the animal kingdom, which kind of plays into Reinhardt's role as a tank, being the front line and how much of his team has to play with and around him to be the most effective. He isn't a lone wolf. Since he is a tech knight, and knights are also associated with shields, it's not that far of a stretch to imagine something like a tech-based shield to come out of that crest. I would have maybe liked a bit more yellow in its mane somewhere though, so it both brings in more yellow as well as incorporates more of that proper distribution of the colors within his palette. I think that would have looked nice. Although he is angular in many regards, like his boots and crown-like helmet, he is still somewhat soft-looking. He's got very circular parts all over him, found in his chest, the rivets on his knees, his joints, his knuckles, parts of his hammer, the jets on his hammer and back, and the pipes found all throughout his design. Speaking of jets, the jets on his hammer look like they exist to aid the movement of his swings, and since he has a giant jet on his back, who's to say he can't aid his movement with that too? Granted, because of the armor Reinhardt has on, his center of gravity is going to be quite high up, meaning agile movements will be very difficult for him. Since he only has one jet on his back, maybe he could throw himself down a straight path and pin someone with his massive shoulder pauldrons. Also, with the way he stands, it lowers his higher center of gravity, making him look really resilient against physical attacks. It's very stalwart looking. His helmet also has a downturned visor, giving it a more angry looking glare. The circular shapes on him all have these two opposing rectangular notches in them. Looks a bit like a giant screw, which is a motif we may see on someone else's character design. Now we can take a quick look at the redesign's physical aspects. They removed most of the spiky bits on him, and they removed his helmet. Underneath the helmet, he has almost a lion's mane of hair on his head. The lion on the hammer got removed, and is now found on the center of his chest. The main thing besides the coloring that changed with his new design is that he's now a lot softer looking, which is aided by the materials and texturing on him now. The new material reflects light a bit differently, so it looks like it would feel a bit warmer to touch. They also added a lot more circular shapes on him, especially with the changes to his shoulder pads. This gives him a bit more of a friendly and approachable look. The removal of the helmet also humanizes him a bit more. He's really no longer a faceless goon. His old set of armor looks like it could have only been put on in an Iron Man-esque transformation, while his new set has visible straps and harnesses that look a bit more easily detachable. They also introduced a design motif on him of a circle with two rectangles attached to it, so it mimics the end of his hammer. The symmetry of it also looks quite man-made and artificial, unlike the Junkers, who are highly asymmetrical. This new design with two rectangular shapes in it is found in varying degrees in this new design, noticeably on the sides of his shoulders, beside the lion crest on his chest, kind of beside the jet on his back, and many of the rounded parts of his armor on his legs and arms have two rectangular divots in them. The circles on the inner portions of his pauldrons now more closely mimic a rondel, used on real sets of armor to further protect the wearer in vulnerable spots, especially thrusting-based attacks. All in all, Reinhardt is supposed to invoke the image of a proud lion encased in metal that isn't afraid of a tussle, and it's likely that his armor will give way under pressure before his sense of honor and duty.
Die with glory, old friend.
Next up, his friend of many years, Torbjorn Lindholm.
Toss me. What?
You should try my balls.
To start, our man Torb is one of the few characters of the Overwatch cast who is canonically laid pipe, since he has many children and in fact has a couple of grandkids. Beginning with his original color palette, his primary color is red, his secondary is a bright gray steel, his tertiary is a mix of yellow and amber, much like Reinhardt. His highlights are a darker steel color that is similar to his pants, as well as a faded lighter brown leather on his glove, as well as the pouches on his back. The bright red on him brings you to the very industrial look of his armor and plating. Then the amber color on him gives off the impression of a hot metal, like his core could be molten. The colors, when mixed with the complexity of line density and detail in his design, create some focuses. Those three focuses are his claw hand, his backpack, and his midsection. Overall, the palette looks hot and somewhat dangerous. In isolation, this palette could maybe work on a support, but when mixed with the physical aspects of his design, it's unlikely Torbjorn is a support, unless he builds something that heals you, like the engineer and his dispenser from Team Fortress 2. Aid would not come directly from him, but from a gizmo he builds. But if he could support you, since he looks like a smith or a mechanic, he would likely provide armor rather than curing your wounds directly. His claw hand also sounds like a ratchet joint when it moves, so that helps add to his player fantasy and mechanical vibe. Now a quick look at the new palette. The primary is still red, it's just a little cleaner now. The secondary is a dark material found all over him, like the inner parts of his backpack, parts of his gun, his boots, and some random straps all over him. His tertiary is a bit harder to tell, but it may be a mix of the orange and yellow on him. His beard seems to have gotten a bit darker, in part due to the shadows created by the larger braids, and he's also starting to go gray a bit in the center of his face now. I think his highlights are the leather in his chest, the blue of his pants, and some of the lighter steel and white on him. This new palette traded the focus on his midsection with its hot metal look for a more dwarven industrial mechanic look, because of his belt and his beard. The new focus now extends to his beard, since the braids add more complexity to that region while the belt's ironclad logo crams a lot of line density into a small space. I don't really have much to say, but his new palette is a bit darker and a bit less energetic because of it. It's possible the artists wanted to convey that Torb is getting a bit older, and he's lost some of the energy he used to have. Now we can take a look at the physical aspects and shape language of his old design. He's 4'7" or 140 centimeters tall, and his body is mostly torso. He's also 6 heads tall. Off topic, but his select animation reminds me of those realistic images of those Angry Birds, if you know what I'm talking about. I love the way he looks. His legs are very short, so much like Roadhog, mobility is not something that immediately comes to mind when you look at this guy. He's overall pretty circular looking. He has some squared edges to him to add a sense of sturdiness and physical resilience to him. His welding mask and nose are also very rectangular. Speaking of his face, he has many lines of motion from his facial hair that all promote this scrunched look to his face, as well as point you to the center of it. The circles are found all over him. His boots, the gun and hammer are made of mostly circular shapes, the knuckles of his glove, and the caps on his beard. Like I mentioned earlier, the most visually complex parts of him are his circular arm, his backpack, and his glowing midsection. The focus on his arm is warranted because his arm looks like a modified wrench, which we do associate with engineering and mechanics. It's a pretty industrial invoking piece of imagery. In his default silhouette, he also holds his arm quite far away from his body, so the contrast in the size puts more focus there too. The way he stands makes his backpack look quite asymmetrical, so at a glance you notice it again. So again, more focus. Asymmetry is a tool of contrast, which I do have a video on, totally not asking you to watch it or anything. The focus on the backpack is warranted, because backpack-looking things call upon the idea of deploying something. Lots of the characters in Overwatch that have a backpack thingy kind of have some sense of area of effect or deploying a gadget in their kit, and Torb is no different. This kind of goes for smaller pouches, but since they're not as large as a backpack, you're more likely to assume that that part of their kit has a less significant impact, such as a shorter cooldown or multiple charges. Torb's backpack is very industrial looking with its sputtering vents and spinning wheel, like it's constantly working to keep something warm. The focus of the hot metal look, when mixed with the warmer palette and dwarven engineer look, I'm going to assume this guy builds hardy and resilient machines. And when the sparks and smoke begin to fly, this guy's probably going to laugh through the shenanigans. He does have a bit of a shape language motif, with a diagonal line within a circular shape, seen on the grips of his weapons, the caps of his beard, the exhaust ports of his backpack, and a bunch of the little notches in his arm are diagonal. Some of his circles also have a singular diagonal line in them, mimicking the look of a flat-headed screw. This design element is also seen sometimes on another character. Now we can move to his new design. They swapped out his welding mask for welding goggles, and they made the gun more red. They also made the smokestacks more angular instead of circular. They added lines of motion within his midsection to point you towards his belt. They removed the pouches on his back and placed little fire symbols on it instead. They also toned down the amount of armor plating on him. He looks a bit more like he just came from home. They removed some of the detail from his arm and added some white there, so attention is still drawn. Then in terms of shape language, they added this metal bracket look to his design that both looks like it protects him from very basic physical trauma, as well as it could be used as a grip to carry something. Again, it evokes a character that's very practical, which most engineers should be. They also toned down the squarer look a bit and softened a lot of the edges on him to make him look a bit friendlier looking, which was also done to Bastion's redesign if you haven't already seen that video. Another shameless plug. They also added a heated metal look to the edge of his gun and the edge of his smokestacks. The gun was also changed to have its gold coils removed, and they added a little valve to it. It looks like it belongs on an engine of some kind. His gun now looks like it belongs to the Milwaukee brand. This dude's collar may be blue, and his neck may be red. Overall, he still gives off the same vibe, just a bit less industrial, and now a bit more homely. Dude also has some great arms. Physique goals, am I right? Overall, Torbjorn is supposed to give off a gruff, practical, and fire or magma-based engineer that isn't afraid of a little heat. But despite his size, he'll probably put up quite a bit of a fight.
Sparkplug's doing great, isn't she? Great, my friend. She's the best.
Now we can cover Reinhardt's squire, Torbjorn's daughter, and my favorite support.
We are in the village of Vank, and we'll go from Vank to kissing, then on to petting, then this place, and then wedding.
So Vank, kissing, petting, wedding.
Yes.
Despite what my friend thinks, Brig is not some sort of Dragon Ball fusion love child between Ryan and Torb, although her original design does take elements from both of those characters to help unify them in hers. To be frank with you all, I think Brig's redesign is one of the few that I actually prefer. I'm not sure if that's a super hot take though. Starting with her original color palette. Her primary is yellow, her secondary is a bright steel, her tertiary is beige, and her highlight is a darker material. The less vibrant and darker materials really draw your attention to the yellow, which is one of the main focuses of her. Surprisingly, her hair is not a part of her palette. Although I do think it helps that they made her hair a reddish brown color. It really adds to the warmth she gives off. In this design, like her father, she has this similar molten look to the sides of her midsection. The focus really isn't seen in her select pose, you have to get in-game to see it, but it does involve the more physical aspects of her. The focuses are her shield, her mace, and straight up the color yellow. The focus of the yellow is okay, since it covers so much of her design, you kind of understand that, she's the large yellow thing moving across your screen. The mace is also focused because she holds it asymmetrically away from the center mass of her body, so it just kind of sticks out, and it's also pretty chunky. With the major focus of yellow on her, it's very invoking of her personality. She's young, she's happy, she's curious, she's creative, and like I've mentioned before, Overwatch decided that yellow is the color of healing in-game, so it does firmly associate her with that. Her shield is also blue, which is highly contrasting to the yellow color on her, so it helps draw attention that way too. The beige on her really adds a sense of practicality to her. The cloth on her kind of looks like a shop rag. It's a design element that evokes someone who's really not afraid to get their hands a bit dirty. Then we can look at her new palette. They ditched the beige for a dark gray, close to black material. They also concentrated more of her yellow, closer to the center of her design, and they added some yellow lights all over her armor panels. The change in position of the yellow now brings your attention closer to her upper body, which all of her focuses do kind of sit nearby, so it does add a bit more cohesion to her design in terms of where you're supposed to look on her. The steel is now also slightly darker. This new palette conveys a similar idea to the previous one, but with the incorporation of black now, it comes off as a bit more sleek, professional, and modern. Then we can look at the physical aspects of her design. She's about 6'3". She's also 9 heads tall. So when paired with Torb's height, I'm assuming the big guy found a tall redwood and wasn't afraid of climbing that tree.
The name's Giganта.
Appropriate.
It's not a problem for you, is it?
Quite the opposite.
She also has some freckles on her cheeks, which is always a plus when they add those to a character.
The brown hair, freckles, and her strong physique were staple of her look.
Her classic design is very soft looking, no really aggressive points on her besides her hair scrunchie and her sabatons. Those two designs, and her left shoulder pad, do share the same shape. She does have some circles on her, found on her chest, her pauldrons, the joints of her greaves, the parts of her backpack, and the center of her belt. She does have some rather thick paneling on her to make her look more resilient like her father, and the more knightly look of some of the armor more closely resembles Reinhardt. The grip of her mace also looks like a hybrid of materials used by the other characters as well, or Blizzard was reusing a texture for her model, which is entirely possible. Like Reinhardt, she also has the pattern of putting 2 rectangular notches in her armor paneling. The mace is very square-shaped, so it looks very resilient and blunt in terms of the damage it'll inflict. If she did have some status effect with her attacks, it would likely be a stun and not a bleed effect. Her shield has a bunch of diagonal lines that very much frame the lion crest as well as give it room to breathe, so like I mentioned, it's one of the focuses. She also has some gear and cog iconography on parts of her, which help with the engineer vibe that her family has. This version of her armor actually shares many of the rivet and screw designs that Ryan and Torb's armor have from their old suits. It's another design element to link them all together. Now for her redesign. They removed the fabric around her waist and changed it to a seemingly stylized welding jacket. The jacket and the fabric help provide the same mass to her silhouette. The jacket now creates a line of motion on her torso that points you to her shoulder pad, which now houses a new noteworthy design element. She now has little drawstrings around her neckline, so it kind of looks like a hoodie. They changed the look of parts of her armor to more closely resemble knightly-looking armor. It now looks a bit less clunky and bulky. This new look, much like Torb's, now gives off a vibe that part of her outfit would come from her working attire, like you'd see parts of her outfit when she's walking around home or the workshop. They changed the shape language on her to look a bit more angular. They introduced this downward angled motif to the character. They still kept the 2 notches within the plates like before, but now they're yellow lights. They added a waist belt that adds some basic triangles and a dynamic line of motion to her hips. It also kind of points you to both her mace and her shield when you follow the line. This new strap now also holds a beautiful thigh pouch. God, I love bullshit strapped to the thigh. It's always a bonus. Oh, it looks so good. It looks so, God, I love you thigh pouches. Her new knee pads kind of look like a stylized rhinoceros beetle. I don't think that was the intent though. A fool may be tripping here. They also put these dual triangles on the sides of her chest, but that's the only time I believe you can find those on her design. You can actually find these same triangles on Ryan's old design. He also had the number 8 on his old armor, which Brig now has. Ryan's new armor has a 9 on it, so that likely means Brig repurposed his old suit. They also introduced a new design element of these elongated lines interrupting a surface, found on the straps of her jacket, most parts of her right arm, and kind of the straps of the left armor. I think this design element is kind of supposed to look like straps holding down armor, but it also somewhat mimics a claw. If you look at her gloves, they now look like a feline paw with its claws extended. Her backpack now also has literal metal paws over the jet booster thingies. The ends of the mace were also changed to look like the individual claws of a feline creature as well. Which brings us to the other new focus. She now has a symbol of a lynx or a bobcat on her shoulder pad and her shield. The shield also has the lynx, and like the previous one, it has room for the symbol to breathe, as well as it kind of has arrows drawing attention to the center of it. It also has the shape on it that looks like a bird's eye view of the mace when it's extended. Overall, this new design seemingly is now invoking that she's becoming her own, more separate character, no longer taking from as many elements from the other heroes in the game, and instead making her own motifs. Lynxes are dangerous felines, but they're not as big and commanding as a lion, but they're a bit more reclusive. Her body language is upright, somewhat athletic, and in a position that could be relaxed a bit if need be. She holds herself with a lot more physical competence and skill compared to a character like Mei, who looks like she'd trip over half the things in front of her. Her silhouette and the way she stands is very proud looking, like Reinhardt, very chivalrous invoking. Also, all the arrows on her point downward, which gives her a very rooted impression. Orisa also has a lot of these similar lines too. So looking at her, the playstyle I'd imagine is like a knightly engineer that can only really defend themselves at close range. When compared to the rest of the roster, if she was a damage hero, because of her size and angularity, she'd play like a shitty Vendetta. She doesn't have a jump pack or anything, she doesn't have a ton of reach, so she doesn't look like she could flank, so she'd be forced to fight near the front line, and she definitely couldn't last long if she was the focus of the enemy team, so she'd make a shitty tank too. She kind of looks like she'd work best behind her team's tank in a more brawl-based composition. So that leaves her with a support role, and like I've mentioned before, Overwatch uses the color yellow on its roster to quickly convey healing. Since she's so tall and her stance is quite upright, she literally stands out when put beside many of the other support heroes. Since she looks so resilient and proud, she gives off the impression of a human watchtower or muster point, almost like people would rally around her. Brigitte is supposed to convey a youthful, creative, and proud knightly engineer that does the right thing, the right way, and for the right reasons.
I know. I had to ask.
You could stay too. Besides, it's their turn now.
She also looks like that one Smith from Dauntless. That game shut down, but it was like that free, it was like a Monster Hunter-esque game for anyone who played it or knew of it. Anyway. This is a bit of a small section, but like much of the designs, the character's first-person animations and point-of-view cameras are used to sell the fantasy of the characters even more, much like how my other video had a bit on the breathing patterns of the Junkers. When Reinhardt walks in first person, his camera moves side to side a lot, really emphasizing the bulk of his frame. The camera's movements are in sync with the rotation of his shoulders. It also lurches a bit forward with each step. He accelerates and decelerates out of each of his steps because of how large he is. The camera also bounces up and down quite aggressively to help emphasize his weight, really making the down position of his walk cycles more apparent, since gravity does pull down, so that position would be favored quite a bit. Torbjorn has very little camera movements with his walk, but his gun does bounce up and down with his walk. That's because if you look in third person, in order to keep pace with the rest of the cast, since they all share the same move speed for most of them, he has to do this goofy looking stride to keep up his pace. They can't keep that same exaggeration of the walk cycle in first person, as it would look quite distracting, so they toned it down quite a bit. Brig has very little up and down motion with her camera, but a decent amount of side to side sway with her character model. The movement is very soft and it doesn't feel as clunky as Ryan's, but the sway does feel like it's coming from someone very tall. But her hand does do this little bounce with each of her strides, so the model bounces up and down, but not the camera. It's likely overlapped with her down position as well.
As I suspected. Nothing but a man.
Red team leader, this is Recon 1.
I want to have a little section here on the proportions of characters as well as armor and character design. It's been noted, especially with Brig, that her cinematic model is clearly different from her model in-game. This is fine, but the differences do need to be explained a bit. Brig is first and foremost designed to be seen in-game and covered in armor, much like Reinhardt. The proportions of the body, especially when in armor, are going to be altered greatly when compared to a more realistic looking body. If Brig had her cinematic physique with all of her current armor on, she'd start to get a very chunky silhouette. If you try to draw the body of Ryan under his armor, you'll notice that he's also pretty crazy looking. So even he has the differences between in-game and the cinematic, but no one really brings that up. What the artists behind Brig are trying to do is have the female form be immediately identifiable from a distance, and since she's wearing pretty heavy clothing and plating, her proportions are going to have to be pushed really far to get that effect. So when the armor comes off with some of her skins, she doesn't really match up. Overwatch as a game relies heavily on the silhouette and bodies of the characters to be immediately identifiable, since much of the roster zip around on your screen, as well as you may only get a glance at them for a couple of frames. Overwatch is not designed the same way as a feature-length film with its characters. You essentially need a character pushed to certain extremes to the point where you can flash them on a screen for only a couple of frames and people can still tell who they just saw. On the whole in character design, aspects of our anatomy are pushed to comical levels to properly convey specific ideas. Most female characters in every piece of animated media are about 20 to 30% thinner than a real woman. Like straight up their skeletons have just been scaled widthwise. And most male characters are given smaller hips, wider shoulders, and larger hands to come off as immediately more masculine, as well as larger hands are really easy to see on screen, and lots of the time you want to see what the hands are doing because we do a lot of expressions with them as well. Another aspect that gets pushed a bit is the thickness of necks on characters. Many women are given artificially thin necks in design, while men are given really thick ones, typically way thicker than average. Lots of the time the necks are so thick that it's nearly as wide as the skull. Another reason on why this is done is likely tied to sexual attraction. I need to do way more research on this. This will likely be covered in far more depth in a video on neoteny and beauty standards that I maybe plan on making, but that's whenever I get to that. It's not a priority right now. I remember reading part of an article that said, when men rate women's physiques, a more noticeable hip-to-waist ratio is positively correlated to being seen as more attractive. When women rated men's physiques, the perceived upper body strength of the man was positively correlated with being more attractive, which is accentuated with narrow hips, wider shoulders, and a smaller looking head. This was regardless of muscle mass, only perceived strength, which is tied to the height of the man's body, as well as the different widths of the parts of his skeleton. So, in regards to Brig's physique, they wanted to make her silhouette read as immediately identifiable and feminine, so they had to push some of the in-game model's proportions. If we look at some of her sprays, it does seem as though the cinematics design of her physique is the canonical version of her, but for the sake of readability of the character, they had to push her proportions to certain extremes. Much like how characters like Mauga and Rein have hands that are thicker than the entirety of Tracer's body. This whole thing does kind of link back to player expression as well. If someone picks a character, or makes the choice to have their character be a woman, You have to make it noticeable somehow, so their choice feels represented, and one of the easiest ways to do that without making them naked, essentially, is to add a very noticeable hourglass shape to the character. But sometimes hiding that shape can actually be what you want to do with the character, or the aspect of identifying whoever's under the clothing doesn't really matter. Like the soldiers in Battlefield 6 wearing so much gear that it's quite hard to quickly identify who the person is without listening to their voice, because those designs wanted to convey the idea of a faceless mass troop. Or you have characters like Mulan and Mizu who wear a bit of extra fabric around their waistlines to hide the shape of their bodies, as that element does play a major role in each of their stories. This is kind of off topic, but putting a bit more mass on your shoulders in terms of muscle does actually give off the effect of making your waist look smaller too. So make use of that. Waiter, more ladies with good looking shoulders please. Preferably sleeveless.
Give it back! This isn't right, that was ours!
Reinhardt's voice actor, Darren DePaul, also voiced Callus in Destiny 2.
I have fed this force with vicious subjugation, battered down the gates of our enemies, and seized our glittering prize. Ooh, glittering prizes!
There's a couple of voice actors in Overwatch who also voiced characters in Destiny, and a couple of the others are the fanatic Fickrel and Lord Saladin. You'll probably have trouble guessing who voiced Fickrel. It surprised me too. It's actually Matthew Mercer. It's seemingly one of the few times where he's not doing his default voice actor voice for any role he's given.
All the same.
Yes, Father, we ever serve and await return.
BT, is there anyone alive on this ship?
No.
What happened?
Well, that's a story for another time.
And then Keith Ferguson, who voices Reaper, also voices Saladin and the Titan Ronin from Titanfall 2.
We thought our quest was finally over. Siva would be ours for the taking. Rasputin responded. Pilot on board, welcome back. Target eliminated, well done. The door. Sombra.
Torbjorn's voice actor, Keith Silverstein, actually voices the commander in Resident Evil 9, the guy who's like Hunk without the helmet. He's also one of the Hell Priests in Doom Eternal.
He has fight in him yet.
In spite of his injuries.
Leon Kennedy. We finally meet.
Brigitte's old enough to make her own decisions. But I can't leave the rest of my family behind.
It's theorized that Brig's Overwatch 2 design was going to include a crown thing on her head. It looks like it was mimicking the shape of Ryan's original helmet. They cut it. I'm kind of glad they did. I didn't really care for it, but now it's seen on one of her alternate skins and it still exists on her player icon. Changing Brig's skin to the Mirror Watch Talon skin will change the look of Mitzi during her cat emote. Honestly, the skin was like the only reason I bought that battle pass that season. In the cinematic Honor and Glory, Brig has a shirt on it that says, "I like to work out because I love to eat," which is very true. The main determining factor of how many calories a day someone needs is how much someone weighs. Yes, physical activity will burn calories, but it's actually not the main factor that contributes to your daily burning of calories. As well as your body will try to keep its daily energy expenditure rather stable, so if you do a lot of physical activity, it will try to slow you down throughout the rest of the day to balance itself out. Your body is great at keeping you alive and stable. Anyway, back to Brig. Since she's so tall and quite athletic, her daily caloric intake would be quite high compared to the average woman, since she'd simply just weigh so much more.
Hey Brigitte, want to go hit the weights?
Only if we can get something to eat afterwards.
Torbjorn has the number 7 on his design, while Brig has the number 8 found on her newer design. And Ryan's new suit has a 9 on it, like I mentioned earlier. Ryan's old suit had the 8 on it before. I'm not sure of the significance of these numbers. Maybe Torbjorn was the 7th hero finalized for the original game. I don't know. In one of Torb's skins, where he was still part of the original Overwatch team, you can see that the hat he used to have now sits atop of Bastion's new design. In the campaign mode, if you look at Brig's entry, it uses her Overwatch 1 concept art rather than her redesign. She's the only one with this issue with her data entry, which is kind of odd. Brig also has a voice line that references the Black Knight from Monty Python's The Holy Grail.
It's just a flesh wound.
Oh, had enough, eh? Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look! It's just a flesh wound.
When you use rally as Brig, there's a faint marching sound effect in the background.
To me!
Reinhardt is currently 63 years old, and that would make him a Gen Alpha baby since he'd be born in the 2010s. Anyway, that's most of this video done. It's not just me though, but did the Overwatch community kind of change its perception of Reinhardt when Overwatch 2 kind of came out over several months? I think the change to 5v5 kind of negatively impacted how people see him right now, since he struggles so much as a solo tank, so people are more likely to get a bit angry with people who play him. Anyway, I've seen those memes of like people making fun of those soy jacks of making fun of Rhine players that I never used to see. I remember playing Overwatch and Overwatch 1 and people were like, we love the Rhine players, but now it's like, screw the Rhine players. And it's like, what? I think they just hate tank. This is tankism. There's tankism in Overwatch right now. I'm sorry. Thank you for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. The whole process of making these videos does take quite a bit of time. Even just writing this script took several hours. So please be patient and take care.